Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Tautvydas, and today I would like to tell you a story about a research that me and the team have performed, and the research has attracted international attention. And that theme is called, and the presentation is called, the impact of technology testing. And it means how the technology testing can attract attention, even though the political attention. And as I've started my speech about the research, and I would like to start from the testing results or the research results. And the research was done by our team. And let's look at the testing results. And the conclusions of the study was that the composition analysis performed on mobile devices manufactured by 3 manufacturers identified 10 instances of increased cybersecurity risk. This cybersecurity assessment analyzes 4 cybersecurity risks related to the general security of factory-installed applications in the devices, threats of leakage of personal data, and restrictions on freedom of expression. It is planned to describe in detail the other cybersecurity risks identified in this comprehensive study and to present the assessment of such risks by the end of 2021. This analysis examines issues related to the security of personal data. And this research was published publicly. You can see the link here. I think that you are able to open the link and you can read the research. Maybe some of you are quite knows what I'm talking about, the people who are a little bit connected to the cybersecurity field. So I think that people have heard about this research. And this is the testing results. And because of my presentation theme is the impact of technology testing, so the impact next day was that Reuters has introduced the research results to the world. And let's look at the impact. Reuters, by the way, is one of the news agency, and its coverage is 1 billion people per day. And let's look. Vilnius, September 21, Lithuania's defense ministry recommended that consumers avoid buying Chinese mobile phones and advised people to throw away the ones they have now after a government report found the devices has built-in censorship capabilities. This was published in September 21, year 2021. After that, another source and another newspaper has released another message connecting to the Reuters message, and it sounded like that. Lithuania, the anti-China vanguard in Europe, played a new trick by urging the country's consumers not to buy Chinese mobile phones and advised them to throw away the ones they currently have amid censorship concerns. And this was published by Global Times, and it's one of the biggest newspapers in China. So by the end of the day, the technological research has introduced Lithuania to the world, to China, Lithuania as anti-China vanguard in Europe. So this is the impact of one technological research. And I believe that every day, all of you who does coding or researches or testing can achieve such notability. So, and after the researches, the press and the people has asked who motivated this. And I believe that every day when you do a test or you do a programming session, you should ask what motivates you to do this, because it's responsibility of coding or testing something. So, first of all, the scientific observation results of the equipment that has been built abroad has attracted our attention, and we have decided to do the tests and to deep dive into the technology that other countries are building and providing us. And of course, the second one is the business necessity. Well, at that time, it wasn't connected directly to the business because it was a public interest case, but because now I'm speaking of Zenit's name, I believe that the second most of the important things could be business necessity. When you are doing a testing session or automation session, I think that you should look at the business and provide the details what the business needs from you. And the third one is public interest. And this is also quite connected to Zenitech because we provide to our clients results that may impact the public. So all of these three things does motivate to perform a test or a coding session. If you have any questions, you can raise your hand and I can answer those directly. The second thing is you need to have a good environment. You need to have a subject knowledge, and that means you need to have global knowledge sharing. Before we have started the research of those phones, of those devices, we have made a lot of researches, international researches that were published in scientific papers. Some of them were listed in IEEE related journals. Those are the scientific journals. And we have formed a scope of our knowledge. What to look at, how the technology can be implemented, and what are the main risks, and where to find those risks. So it's quite important to have the good global knowledge sharing. Other thing, what's quite important in an environment, that you need to have sufficient tooling. So the research took the team around 6 months to complete the research. It's quite a long term for a thing, so it's quite a big project. Because the research has ended in a 30 pages paper, so you needed to know what to put in those papers. And you need to do it in the most fast and quick and optimal way that is possible. So we have also used automation tools, and we have optimized the processes. And to be frank with you, I can see those processes also integrated in our company. That's very interesting. And of course, you need those processes simplified as much as possible, because if you will have anything additional, and if you will not be able to have a direct and analytical approach, it will be very hard to complete your tasks. Especially when you know that those results will be presented internationally. So there's a lot of risk of you moving from the subject, and and this can cause danger to your research and to the results. So you need to be quite direct and very analytical. And I would like to talk a little bit about the strategy, because I have received a lot of questions about what strategy do you apply during the researches, the testing, or other types of analysis. So normally, when the research or a testing session is being started, it's quite important that it would be time efficient, because you need to distinguish and focus on the most important issues. Well, it sounds quite trivial, but when you see a device, let's say it's my colleague's device, you just see a device. And you need to deep dive into this device without knowing anything about this. You do not receive data sheets from the manufacturer. Any leaked code, it's illegal, and you cannot do this, and you cannot have this. So you need to distinguish what are you looking after, and what is the most important to look at the device. You can just imagine by yourself, by sitting here, if you would receive any type of piece of hardware or piece of code, how you would approach it. What would be the most important to look at? Maybe the screen, maybe the screen has an interface who has got vulnerabilities in it, a microchip, something like that. And maybe the microchip isn't encrypted, or a processor isn't encrypted and can leak your data. There are some cases, I'm speaking about the real cases that were published in scientific journals. And you need to know where to look. Because if you would start looking deeply about in the device, at the code, so you can get lost. And commonly the teams, the scientific teams that are also performing the researches, quite often get lost in the code and the devices, and sadly, the researchers come out without zero results. The second thing in the strategy when you are looking at the code of the device or anything when you are testing is that it would be technological consistent. So we need to select one or two technologies at most that you know that you're expert at, and you need to go through those technologies. I wouldn't advise jumping from one technology to another, and that also sounds quite trivial, but you need to, if you know, for example, assembler of a processor, so my advice would be to keep to that assembler and do not try adding other items, because you also can get lost. And of course, a single testing path helps to avoid gaps in the results, because a good research is a research which is consistent and doesn't have any type of gaps. So, because in the gaps, there are uncertainties, and if there are uncertainties that you didn't mention something about the screen, so the other side who you are testing could say that, oh my, but you didn't mention this. So you're hiding something, and this is quite inconsistent. So just keep in mind, I would just advise just to keep in mind if you are looking at the code or something. So you need to be quite consistent and to know what you are looking at, and you should imagine that somebody will also be looking at your results. So they need to be consistent. And the last thing is that everything needs to be evidence-based. If you have something, let's say, in this case was that you need to provide the evidence, and I will be able to share the research and to show in the Q&A session, if you will want, I will be able to present the research and to show how the evidence was presented. But let's say in a business community, sometimes you can get rough with the client, and clients can say that, oh, it was not tested, or it has bugs or vulnerabilities. So I think it would be quite a good idea if you would be able to keep the evidence that you would be able to present to the client when you need this. This also helps to present your work at a high level. And if you need to defend your position, not even your position, but the company's position as well. So, because all of the work that we are all doing needs to be quite clear and needs to be transparent as possible. I have taken some screenshots from the research, because the research is quite technical. It has testing layers. So, in terms that I meant that you need to be quite consistent, we have selected 3 layers, 3 technologies that we know: the network layer, file system, and applications layer. So, talking about the network layer, we have analyzed where are the devices connecting to and what data is being transferred. We have successfully took the information from the file system and were able to decrypt the information. So you can see that we are quite consistent. We are going from the network stack to the file system, and one of the key things was to be able to decrypt what those devices are sending and to where. So to know where the devices are connecting, it's relatively quite easy. But to know what's the content, and it's quite important to know what is being delivered to the servers from the device when you're doing such a research. So the second layer was the file system, and thankfully we were able to decrypt the traffic. And at the end, the third layer, we were going to the application. We were able to disassemble the manufacturer-made applications, the native applications, and we were able to see what is happening in the application. So I think that you can see here the pipeline and the consistency. If you start from the network, you're going through the file system layer, decrypt using the information that is accessible in the file system, and go to the application. So thinking about the mobile device, mobile devices are being used by people because they have applications. So this is the type of consistency that I'm talking about. So you need to be quite consistent, and when you are starting a research or testing, you need to know what are the possible outcomes of the research. So you need to be quite consistent. And one of the things that I would like also to mention is evidence and communication. If you have the ability to put in the references, please do this, because normally in the international scientific community, people say that if this is idea only made by you, so this idea could be questionable. If you are able to citate and quote something from the international sources and to have good references, it also heightened the value of your work and your words. It makes your words more solid. The second thing is to be, if you need to communicate, your communication should be quite rapid. You should be able to answer the questions, in our case, raised by public and journalists, quite fast, because otherwise there might be some thoughts that the story is not true, that there could be some gaps or uncertainties, so you need to react quite fast. And I believe that this is the same when you're talking to your clients, to your project managers, it is the same. If you're able to provide the information as fast as possible, I would also advise to do this because it's quite important. And as I also mentioned, the communication needs to be evidence-based. A code of putting code snippets to the client or to anyone really helps. Because you can always say that, oh, look at this, and this works like that, as it was mentioned in the documentation. And it also solidifies everything that you have to present. And the final thing is the presentation, that you need to document the information in every case about everything, because in case of emergency, most of the information that was documented will be very useful. And also, when you use sites that sometimes you gather ideas from, the site that contains code, I think that you know what the site I'm talking about. You need to do the fact checking and cross checking in case the code can have vulnerabilities, stolen unethical code. So always I would advise to do multiple sources, look at multiple sources for fact checking and cross checking, and it will minimize the possibility of a mistake. And of course, the presentation should be quite analytical, by numbers and graphs and not emotions. Because sometimes when you're stressed and when you're having a lot of questions being asked about same thing, sometimes you can go emotional and start miscommunicating. So the best thing would be that you would be able to present your data as analytical as possible. And of course, there is a responsibility that you need to, when you're doing the testing, it's quite important to know about the other side, because you will be contacting to the other side, and the other side also has its own experts. In our case, the experts was a global companies, multiple companies, that has more than 10,000 of engineers, of really high seniority engineers. And you, before pushing your code to the Git or when you're presenting something, or when you're presenting the results, you should know that those results could be analyzed and criticized. So you need to be quite responsible. What do you upload or what do you present? Because all the ideas and the things that I'm also talking about right now could go into legal issues, especially if there are inaccurate findings or mistakenly interpreted data. So you could get, simply speaking, you could get in trouble. So you need to think about responsibility as it's one of the core factors when you're presenting your work. So this is the end of my presentation.